Record on this computer. All right, welcome everyone. I know we've got a few attendees here today, and a few folks will also be watching on YouTube, but today we have Marshall Cherry with us, who is the CEO of Roanoke Electric Cooperative. Happy to have Marshall because he is a current participant in PAYS, or Pay As You Save. He's joined us today to share his insights and his experience with the program. And just want to say thanks, Marshall. And at this time, I'll kick it over to Marshall or Jeff or Tammy, whoever would like to speak first.
Well, this is Tammy. I just want to give a tad bit more color to the background before Marshall jumps in here. Marshall Cherry at Roanoke Electric Cooperative helped literally craft and launch the Upgrade to Save program, which was the first Pay As You Save based program that a cooperative embraced in the country. And it was much to Marshall's credit and leadership that Pay As You Save through the Upgrade to Save program that Roanoke crafted there in Roanoke Electric territory has become such a model, if you will, Pay As You Save program for an awful lot of utilities across the country to sort of look into. And Marshall, as always, thank you for your being willing to be available for other utility managers and decision makers on this call today. In my experience, there's nothing better than a peer-to-peer exchange. I can, talk about the bits and bobs of PAYS and how it works and all of the details on an operational level, but there's just nothing like a utility talking to another utility who's been there, particularly one like Roanoke Electric Cooperative, which is kind of like, I don't know the age of those on the call, but it's Roanoke Electric Cooperative is like the little engine that could, in my mind. The second poorest county in the United States of America is within Roanoke Electric Cooperative service territory. People there are just struggling with high energy burdens. And whether or not that pertains to your, customers on your utility today, just know that if it can happen at Roanoke, and Roanoke has made it so successful, it can truly happen anywhere if you just have the desire. So anyway, with that, applause to Marshall for all your work to date. Upgrade to Save is still a model program that many, many utilities turn to. And I'm just thrilled that, Marshall, you're still willing to be involved and help other utilities do their due diligence. So thank you in advance, Marshall. And Jeff, Gertz, unless there's anything you want to add to that.
That was a great intro, so I'll save my comments to the end.
Okay, well, in that case, Marshall Cherry, it's all over to you.
Thank you. Thank you all so much, and honored to have this opportunity to come before you all. And you level set it and teed it up. I couldn't have done it any better, Tammy. The way you laid it out, it's really a major part of our story here at Roanoke Cooperative, serving a very economically distressed region. And the challenge that we have faced many times over the years, particularly from our board of directors, is how do we address energy burden? Although, to be quite honest, that's not a term that I really knew. I don't think many of us knew, I guess, roughly 10 years ago, but certainly we know the reality of it, and it is real, particularly in a lot of these areas that we do serve. And so that's what really drives us in terms of making sure that we're living up to our mission and tenets of affordability, sustainability, of course, being safe in our approach and reliable in delivering electricity in northeastern North Carolina, and again, one of the more economically distressed regions in America. And with that, our board really chartered us years ago to look at something different, because we had tried and attempted several iterations of energy efficiency financing programs. And to give a little bit more, I guess, backdrop to me, I've actually worked, later this month, in a few weeks, will make 30 years that I've been employed here at Roanoke Cooperative. And fortunate enough, of course, I've been the CEO for, I guess, close to 18 months now, but most of my career has been around consumer solutions. And So with that, a lot of the programs, we're very close to programs as such as, energy efficiency financing. I think even one of, I would like to call my first signature programs here was a heat pump loan program. And to be quite honest, we didn't really make the impact, I guess, in terms of really meeting the needs for individuals who are in most need of a service as such. Most of the people that we were able to serve were folks who could likely get funding from the bank and just get a bank loan and move forward with that. And so some of the, I guess, cycles that we've seen over the years has been, and you probably would have experienced the same, particularly for us, we're winter peaking utilities. So after these winter bills go out, we get the phone calls, we send a person out, we'll walk through the retrofits, recommended retrofits. And typically the conversation would end right there without an option. In the very next year, same individual, you're having that same conversation. And we may recommend ways for individuals to get the funding. We could recommend the retrofits, but we didn't have, in a lot of cases, the funding tools or facilities to support such. So given that, we wanted to do something different, and we wanted to really make impact, through our member owners. And some of the, I would say, the anecdotes that we picked up along the way have been some of the things that we've identified that has supported a business case around this. This is, and I'll say this, that this is not a social service program. And I say that because this is a question that comes across, quite often. I mean, why are you interested in selling less of your service? Why would you do such? And these are questions that we ask. But particularly electric co-ops, and I know many of you, you're mission focused and you're addressing equity, or else you wouldn't be on this call. So you're trying to find ways to level that playing field and ensure that everyone has access to the capital that's needed. And so that's what a major part of this is. But at the same time, we've been able to see impact back to the grid, back to the utility, that has given us the ability to find a way that it is not being subsidized by other ratepayers. These projects actually stand on their own. Could you go to the next slide? And I can speak more to that. Tammy, thank you so much. So this just gives a little bit of context or substance to what I just laid out. Going back to that question earlier, why would you sell less of the service in order to just provide such a service? Well, for us, we're in our requirements contract with a wholesale supplier, and in it we do have some components in there where we have opportunities to avoid some peak demand costs, which of course is for all of us, is the most expensive portion of our wholesale power bill. And so how do we really work toward bringing down some of our capacity costs, which typically is about almost 50% of our wholesale power supply. We're right at about, I'm talking to electric utility professionals here, so I can speak a little bit, I guess, in engineer terms, but nevertheless, about 55-60% load factor is what we will experience on a typical month. And so we're trying to, of course, identify how do we avoid some of that peak demand cost, which really plays very nicely into our ability, in addition to what we're recovering from individuals. But those avoided peak demand costs are really more than compensating the losses in kilowatt hour sales. And we've seen it. I mean, there have been some homes on our system. We've run data analytics, and there have been times, of course, we've had a polar vortex that will come through our region. When we do the data analytics, we will see some homes on our system, maybe a mobile home that's not underpinned, does not have very adequate insulation, that may have a $1,200 or $1,300 1 month bill. And also, in looking at that home, it is generally one of the highest contributors to our peak demand costs during that polar vortex. So the question then becomes, if we can figure out how to support reducing kilowatt hour sales for this individual, the savings, the value of those savings on our capacity costs certainly bodes well for us on our P&L statement, strengthening our bottom line. And so that in and of itself has shown itself to be a big contributor to it. And that part of it alone, I mean, of course, there are other things that we're doing, but the value of the energy that we're not selling, per upgrade, you can see the dollar amounts. And of course, this is over the course, a cost benefit analysis of over a 15-year period of time. We're paying, generally most of our upgrades are right at about $6,200. The investment that we're making, and of course the operation costs, companies who can provide operations implementers of programs as such. And that was valuable to us as well, as we attempted early on to try to take this on internally, but we did call on the assistance and services of e-utility. Of course, my partner on the call here was a major part of that in leading program operation costs. The incentives, we've been very light on incentives. We really don't do a lot now, but over time we have done some, whereas we may contribute something towards some low-hanging fruit of a health and safety upgrade that's needed so that we can move forward with the project. But the value of it kind of boded well for us in terms of moving forward with an investment. And we've also included some costs, because there's, in all assets, right, there's some operation and maintenance expense that we must keep in mind. And particularly if we have made this investment, it works for us if this investment is working, but it also works for the member owner if this investment is working. And so it's helping us on as a part of being a resource for us in our portfolio of wholesale power delivery back to our membership. So the electricity, of course, wholesale demand that we avoid buying, as you can see, almost $4,900, per upgrade. And then, of course, we're recovering the money that we have invested. We're also avoiding some costs, because there are some regulatory expenses here in North Carolina. And North Carolina was one of the first states in the Southeast to actually have a renewable energy portfolio standards law. So we're able to apply these energy efficiency credits as a part of our sustainability strategy, reporting it back to the state, that instead of us going out having to buy renewable energy credits, these investments actually can account for the same. So we're avoiding that expense. And the value of the overall demand response component of our work, as you can see here, is about $1,200. And then, of course, the interest, very light on that. We're literally passing through a very minimal amount there on interest. But the total benefits to us over that 15-year period of time was about $13,000. So we're talking about a 15-year net present value of about $3,000 per investment that we're making in these homes. And as you can see, and this is a sample of about 327, but we have to date completed almost 700. We've completed right at about 700 projects, and there's still more work for us to do. And I'll say this as well, that this was another, let's just call it an anecdote, that we identified when we started down this path. As mentioned earlier, we are in a very economically distressed region. So what we've learned is that many of the homes in our service territory are in need of some type of health and safety upgrade. And we've been very fortunate in working with clean energy funders to assist us with clearing some of those hurdles for our low-income membership, who typically are in that holding pattern of needing a health and safety upgrade cleared before we can move them into this program. And so given that, we have about another 500 to 600 in the queue right now that we're working. And these are folks who we've had to, I would say, put them on pause in the program. We didn't fully deny them because we were looking for ways to be able to finally support them. And we have some solutions through some, again, great assistance and help from philanthropic partners who've identified that we should be able to use those philanthropic dollars to sponsor solar power credits at community solar gardens. And we're providing those credits once they are sponsored. Once those subscriptions are sponsored, the credits are offsetting the investment that's needed to be made in that home to address the health and safety concern that ultimately now puts this home in a position where it can fully participate in this program. So we have more work to do, but we are glad to have this level of assistance available to us to continue moving forward with our mission, because these homes are certainly some of the homes that are some of the biggest contributors, again, to our peak demand costs, particularly in the winter, as we're a winter peaking utility. And one other anecdote I will say, looking at that bottom note that you see there, is the beneficial electrification opportunity that has come here. We have, you know, many of our homes in our service territory that heat with propane, and we're one of our strategies here. I mean, of course, one of our strategies here when we look at the 3 tenants at Roanoke. One is we're doing everything we can to let's just say avoid wholesale power costs. We're really trying to be more flexible in how we purchase power and modernize our grid to do the same. But then there's another element where we do want to electrify, you know, this organization, because again, we're not growing, because given the fact that we're in an economically distressed region. This area here is one that's not growing. As a matter of fact, we lose about 1/4% of our meters every year. So this whole electrification thing, we are trying to stand up in an EV program, but certainly this program here, every win helps whenever we can convert from propane to all electric heat pumps. And so we've been able to identify that, you know, some of these homes made that decision. And this was one that, I mean, we knew that it could happen, but we really didn't track it on the front end of a business plan. But certainly great to see this, because individuals are converting over. And another component that you see in this same note is the fact that these homes are great candidates for demand response programs, particularly if you have high-speed internet access. And many of you may have, you know, a broadband solution already in your towns, and that's great. Given where we are, we actually have a struggle there. But what we've done is we've made it a part of our families of companies where we actually stood up a competitive local exchange carrier, telecom business that specifically delivers broadband. So we're deep into the throes of a broadband deployment through a subsidiary company of our organization, which, you know, bodes well for us and the community, right? Because we're trying to develop this region. But it really gives us an opportunity to modernize how we operate on the grid through, again, engineering terms, some voltage reduction, conservation voltage reduction work. But also it gives us a chance to engage with our member owner behind the meter. And when we can do that, we're able to, through these thermostats and water heater controls, dial the thermostat in the direction where we need it to go, whether it's summer or winter, to ensure that we can bring down some of our capacity costs during that peak period. And so we work very closely with our wholesale supplier on programs like that. And so this is another great benefit that we've seen. And again, they marry very well with programs like this, because you have an all-inclusive solution for the individuals who are participating. Next slide, please.
Hey, Marshall, can I ask you,
Sure.
Sorry, I got a call coming in there. Do you know roughly how big your service territory is roughly in terms
Yes,
of?
you're talking about square footage?
I would say, like, if you know the customer number, the number of customers, or
What? Yes. So we have 14,200 meters in our
nice.
service territory. What's interesting is our land mass is one of the largest, maybe the second largest in the state of North Carolina. Our density, very low. If you all are representing munis and towns, then this may be shocking to you all, because I typically, you know, in towns, homes should be close together. I may be speaking out of turn, but for us, it's right at 6 meters for every mile of line. We actually have the lowest density in the state of North Carolina.
Nice.
And again, there's that out migration to cities like Raleigh and Durham and Charlotte, which are west of us.
That's so interesting. And then I also wanted to ask you just real quick, can you talk a little bit about what generation assets you guys may or may not own?
Yeah, sure. So we actually own, and this is all tied to a greater strategy that we're working on with our generation and transmission cooperative. but about 50% of our assets, and we actually own a significant portion of this, would be nuclear. So we're part owners of a Catawba nuclear station down in York Valley, South Carolina. That's the biggest portion for us. Following that, we I want to say about a little less than 25% would be natural gas. And then beyond that, of course, coal, which for most of us is dwindling. I think we're less than 10% on coal, and then of course from there are some market purchases that we're actually investing in, but renewables are a big part. And we've always, and I believe most of the munis in the country are probably included here. We're not owners, but we have access to wheeling rights from one of the power marketing agencies, because I believe when those laws were crafted back in the 40s, the co-ops and the munis actually could tap into that. And so we can count hydroelectricity as a portion because of the fact that we actually have access to wheeling rights from some dams through the Southeastern Power Administration. I can't remember which one is up in Iowa, but I believe the muni should have access to that as well.
Great answer. Thank you so much.
Sure thing. And so to that point, I believe Tammy was setting the stage today, there's, I can't remember the actual term, but there's an index that speaks to intensity, the energy intensity in a home. And what we have found through, definitely here in North Carolina, through a lot of the homes, the surveys that we're doing, that the energy use per square foot in a home, footage in a home, and on our service territory is typically higher than what we're seeing for cooperatives across the state of North Carolina. So therein lies a major opportunity for us, right, to reduce some of the electricity savings, but demand savings as well, if we're smart about when we can, cut some of that energy production. And so as you can see, the average electricity savings per home from the PAYS model at Roanoke is about second highest out of these four. These entities here, speaking of Roanoke, again, going back a little bit in time, as Tammy was speaking to our history, one of the first adopters of this funding source from the USDA, known as the Energy Efficiency Conservation and Loan Program. We had a business plan that we wrote. There was another cooperative in Arkansas that did the same, but I don't think they used the PAYS model. We used the PAYS model, which we found to be very successful for us. When we talk about the capital that's coming from the USDA, that was 3% money, but we've actually converted our credit facility to another source under USDA that's 0% financing now. So we have good access to capital, low interest capital. We also have this PAYS model, the pay as you save model, which ensures that the member owner or the ratepayer will be cash flow positive day one after the investment. And of course, the other kicker here of those three pillars would be the recovery or the tariff. And here in the state of North Carolina, for the co-ops, we don't fall under, any utilities commission's jurisdictions. But we do have watchdogs, if you will. However, our local boards are really our regulators. And so we had the ability and the purview to move forward with establishing in our rate schedule that really gives us the ability to recover on the investment, because it is a resource of ours, the investment we've made in that home. So savings per home, as you can see, about a little over 4,228 kilowatt hours, per year. And then of course, on the demand savings per home from the utility pays, 1.2 kW. And so this is significant for us, because again, this is an interesting part of our overall strategy, whereas we want to ensure that we can reduce some of our peak demand costs. And so this again speaks volumes to the program and the value that it has back to the utility, while at the same time ensuring that individuals who are not participating in this program are not subsidizing the individuals who are actually participating in the program.
Hey, Marshall, can I ask you, we just had a question come in from Chris Rodman in Wall Lake.
Sure.
He says he's curious if you know what the percentage it equates to on the average KWH savings per year in a home. So that 4228 number, do you know what percentage of the home's overall energy use that typically ends up being for
Yes,
y'all?
about 20%. Yeah,
20%.
about 20%. Yes, absolutely.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Good
Great
deal.
question. Thank you.
Yep.
Good deal. Okay. And with that, I guess we can go to the next slide.
I don't know why it's not. Oh, there we go.
There we go. So you all saw this earlier in the table that I did share, and of course the NPV for us has been pretty huge. Given, I think a lot of it is driven by, and that's why I could say that 20% earlier, because of the higher energy intensity index in the homes in our region. But it also gives us, a pretty big opportunity here from a net present value standpoint for all of our investments, to collective 327 that you see here. So this is the value here, and we very closely with individuals on measurement and verification projects around the program, to really help us kind of solidify these numbers that we do present before individuals. And so, yeah, right at about 327 of the sample here, which were some of our earlier, I guess, adopters of the program. But big opportunity there, I would say, for the member owner as well as us. And that's the thing I like about the program. Next slide, please. And so just, overall, this is an inclusive utility investment, and key word there is inclusive, because prior to, as you heard me say earlier, we've had many iterations of energy efficiency financing programs, but everyone could not get access to the program because of the fact we were having to send people off to get financing on their own, or if we tried something internally, especially some of the earlier programs, we didn't really do a lot of credit checks or anything like that. We just look strictly at an individual's payment history on their energy bill. And I think most of us can attest that low income individuals in many cases may not be in that category where they're some of your best ratepayers. So that again created a marginalized community there, because low income member owners could not access the program. But of course, as some of these newer programs are unveiling, coming out of the infrastructure, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and of course now with the rebates that can, the Inflation Reduction Act, when you combine the work that we've already been doing with some of these programs that are coming down the pipeline, it could really, I think there's an opportunity for us here to really transform our communities, to be a major part of the whole clean energy transition. I know I'm preaching to the choir now, but the amount of money that we do see, and I understand that you're having to go through processes and like at times to figure out how to get to the funding. But if we don't solve this equation now with what's out there now, I don't know when we ever would. To me, the amount of funding that we're talking about now is very equivalent to more than likely the monies that started electric co-ops in the first place, and that was during the New Deal era back in the 1930s during President Roosevelt's administration. So a lot of opportunity here to address needs, in low income areas, and ensuring that all of our member owners have access to the capital that's needed to enable them to unlock the ability to get to the funding, the access to funding that they need to ultimately have their homes repaired, and in all of that, live more comfortably. New heat pumps, I guess, some some of the retrofits, and I didn't say this earlier, that are some of the most popular retrofits. I mean, we're doing a lot to the building envelope, from, you know, weatherization. We're doing duct sealing. I mean, we will also install ducts if needed. Heat pumps, of course, a big part, going back to the whole beneficial electrification aspect of the work. But that in a nutshell covers quite a bit of it, of those of the work that we're doing. But we're looking at some other components now, you know, as we look at some of the programs that are available, that are showing themselves to be, I guess, a little more popular through DOE's Energy Star program. Whether it's windows, that's kind of on the periphery right now. These are things, other things that we're paying attention to, but that's really been the core of what we have done over these years. And so, just by and large, again, this is a major opportunity, you know, that we have with the funding. And I feel that, you know, we locally have established a program that puts us in a position, I would say, that makes us shovel ready for some of the opportunities that are coming down the pipeline. And we've been pretty consistent. We're going after, you know, we've been submitting concept papers, and, you know, whether it's the IIJA, and of course now that as things are beginning to unveil, you know, with IRA, we're certainly looking very closely there as well. So with that, again, as always, enjoy having these opportunities to share. And of course, thank you all for having me back. And certainly I'm here. If there are any questions now or in the future, I believe you all will have access to my email. If there are follow-up questions, happy to share. It's a great program, I'll say overall. It's certainly one that has helped us, even as a utility. When you talk about consumer satisfaction, this is a program that has really added value for us.
Thank you, Marshall. Really appreciate your time. I wanted to just point out a couple things and maybe ask you a couple questions or, you know, points for clarification. So you just started to elaborate a little bit on what sorts of upgrades are typically being provided through the program. So can you kind of, you know, lump in together what most packages are covering? What exactly do you mean when you say weatherization? And obviously HVAC is HVAC.
Yeah.
What do you mean when you say weatherization?
Yes. So we're you know, blowing in insulation. We'll do, you know, some typical things, you know, caulking. We will, again, duct sealing has been pretty popular for us as well. There have been times where where we would go pretty deep there in terms of duct sealing. But as I was saying, Tammy, you know, mainly the building envelope, but again, a lot of the work has been centered around HVAC work as well. But the weatherization work that we're doing is, if you were to ask me about what's giving, I guess, the quickest wins, because that's an investment that's not adding or generating any electricity. So there are some immediate savings that are coming from the weatherization work. Now, we do know that if you put a new heat pump in, there's still some energy you're going to have to pay, but there are savings that's tied to it as well. But we do find that you know, the weatherization component of it gives us a lot of opportunity for savings for those individuals.
Great. Thank you. And then another question, I know the answer to these, but I really want you to, you know, speak to them. And so,
Sure.
With respect to anyone ever being disconnected for failure to pay their tariff charge, can you explain if that's ever happened? And then I guess that ends it.
You know what's interesting, Tammy, is we have not. And this has been, again, we're talking about, this has been since 2015. June 2015 is when we stood up our first project. And we've been very light there. Now, we've come close in some situations because there have been some, well, just like anything. I mean, this is money that we're investing like a bank, right? And so the write-off rate for this is very minimal. I mean, we've done, as I mentioned earlier, almost 700 projects. And to date, there are only 4 that we've actually written off. And these are ones that really came close in answering your question to a disconnect, but we have not experienced an adverse situation where an individual is being disconnected for non-pay under this program. And
the four that you did write off,
yes,
were these contractor? I mean, I guess I know
Yes.
the answer to these, but could you
yes,
speak to what happens when
right.
somebody is upside down? What's the investigatory process that utility goes through and
Right.
Roanoke, and then how you made that decision?
Right. And so of the four, there were some situations. These were projects that we actually took on very early in our program. And so there was some workmanship, challenges that we face.
And I'm
And
going to say, this was before, I'm going to interrupt you. This was before
Yes.
utility
yes, it
got
is.
involved.
This is
Just to
before
point that out.
utility. That's right. We'll get that out there. This is definitely before utility. So there was some workmanship issues, and we had to make a decision internally. Do we continue going down this fight of going back and forth, or do we put the program at risk, knowing that this was a contractor who we had endorsed? The good thing I will say, and I believe you can help me with this, Tammy, I know that we have an organization who has worked with us in the spirit of helping stand up these types of programs, who have brought forth loan loss reserves.
Right.
And what happened in those situations, we were actually made whole in all of these because we submitted the documentation as to what happened, and we were made whole in those situations. Now, going back to, there was another question, I heard in what you said right then, and I want to speak to it, is the investment process for those that are upside down or perceived to be upside down. I mean, we have a measurement and verification process, whereas we can look at through normalized weather patterns to determine whether or not that individual is, upside down. We are, again, going back to the fact that we have been able to work very closely with some philanthropic organizations, looking at some of our early projects, and we're seeing where there are some situations where it looks like individuals may very well be upside down. And I feel honestly that it was because we didn't collect enough of a co-payment on the front end. And so we put all of the investment in the tariff. And so and let me speak to that, because there may be a question from the group on that, is there are going to be some situations, whereas because we're trying to make sure when we think about the pays model, we want to make sure that the recovery charge that's on that bill each month is less than the monthly savings. Our ratio is 80%. And so there are times where the individual may need to make a co-payment to ensure that we will have that. Now, at the end of it, if an individual does that, they're still getting something right out of the deal. They didn't have to pay $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 for a heat pump, but they put some skin in the game in order to get that new heat pump packaged with the weatherization work we've done to get up under 80%. So I feel like what happened was, and this is all pre-utility, we put it all in the tariff. And what happened there is, because that tariff is so high, it was actually more than the savings. So what we're doing to correct some of that, and again, being an early adopter, you realize when you're a beta tester, you find these types of problems. But we do have funding, again, going back to that same funding source, that's helping us address some of the health and safety issues that we're finding on our system, that those are funds that are available as well to help us bring down some of these tariffs if need be. And we haven't fully formalized that yet, but that's in the works for us, because there are some that we've identified from early on that really were not good investments unless we collected a co-payment, and we just didn't collect the co-payment. That was on us.
Well, I think too, when you guys started, and I could be wrong, so certainly correct me, but when you guys first started, well before utility got involved, were you guys following a 90-10 rule, or were you following an 80-20 rule?
We started with a 90-10, and then we converted to an 80-20 because we wanted to make sure that, there was more room there between the savings and the actual tariff recovery.
Right. And that's what I thought. So So just to fill in a little bit more color, I want to add something in here. So one of the things that has changed over the course of time with pays, again, Marshall, thank goodness, was an early adopter, or we wouldn't be having this conversation today with all this verified data. But one of the things was that in the beginning, pays did allow for a 90-10. And because back then, there wasn't enough data. There also wasn't a really good history with software and a software product that could really accurately estimate forward savings, because all the off-the-shelf software of that time was really based on deemed savings, not site-specific meter savings. And so what I can't help but this sound a little salesy because we're utility, but I don't mean it to come this way, you guys, but one of the things that utility recognized very early on when we started doing this work was that there wasn't an off-the-shelf software that was a ready play that we could really look to and stand behind in terms of estimated savings, because everything was around deemed savings. And so one of the very first investments utility made, having seen this gap and this need, was to work with Optimizer Energy and start to share data with them that was meter-based to help them really refine their modeling, their energy modeling, to be more reflective of a program like this as opposed to deemed savings-based. And so that relationship continues today. Between that work that we've done with Optimizer, which I mentioned, maybe you recall it the other day on the call, but that's that data collection app that we would deploy in your service territory. Utility would do like we do for Marshall Cherry's group still now, is create that the most cost-effective offer. We handle that component, so your team doesn't have to worry about that. We handle that component and turn around and produce the most cost-effective offer for you. But also, it's no longer 90-10, it's 80-20, so that there's a little more padding in there so that we can avoid any upside down scenarios. So anyway, I just want to add that color in there. Again, what Marshall was explaining is very early on, prior to utility, but also prior to the software strides that we've made, thanks to Marshall's bravery in being willing to be the first one to really, take the hits, as it were.
Very nice. I have a question. When it comes to keeping the savings greater than the tariff charge each month, do you have the ability to shorten or expand the payback period or the term of the loan, so to speak, to lower the tariff?
Great question. Yes. And we try to make, and of course, the idea there is to ensure that it comes in, the tariff terms are shorter than the useful life of the measure. And yes, many of our measures, they go as long as 15 years or so. So right now, our maximum is 12 years. We will go as high as 12 years on a tariff recovery.
Great answer.
And I think to your question, Jeff, if I can expand, I think I heard a different question in there. So if a utility has to, if we do an investigation, determine the cause of a failure is the member or the customer, remember, then there's no help for that customer while they're occupying that premise. But should they leave that premise, then the utility does need to make that repair and spend that money to make that repair, because the new subsequent occupant would not be getting the savings that they need to be able to get. In that case, then the utility has absolutely every right to extend the tariff term to get, that $800 or $1,000 or whatever that repair cost was back. If that makes sense.
Any questions from some of our members on the call? I have more questions to ask, but I want to make sure I'm not talking over any of you guys. Okay, here is a quick question. Marshall, what would you say is the most common project that goes through pays?
Right. So, definitely, blowing in insulation has been well over 95% of them. Installation
Gotcha.
work, yeah, that's huge. Because again, pump is the return is very easy on that because it's not a producer of energy. But installation, like I said, we've done quite a few heat pumps, but the weatherization aspect is really the most popular. I mean,
Nice.
that's showing up when we do the actual assessments when we go out to the member owners.
Do you guys also accept sort of like regular HVAC maintenance in pays?
Right, we do. Actually, we actually have a individual on staff now that we have staffed who does the assessments for us, but he also leads the whole process around the HVAC maintenance. So we account for that cost within, being a part of the program. So we don't attack it, we don't approach it separately. It's just kind of all inclusive in that tariff recovery.
Awesome. And I see, Joel, I see your hand is raised there. You're welcome to unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, thanks. I'm interested just in terms of, especially since installation is sounds like an almost in every case piece, how do you deal with, and maybe this has to deal with some of your waiting list of health and safety issues, but how do you deal with customers who might be good candidates for installation, but they've got air sealing problems, or sometimes when you start to improve a home, you start pulling at a string and you don't know what you're going to end up unraveling. How do you work the rest of those issues that you might come across in an installation job into the program?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, we actually in some cases, and if there's a need, going back, I guess, to the whole health and safety piece, co-pays, if that's what's required, we may have to go that route. There have been times if we can identify if the individual themselves who are applying were, qualifying for other, I guess, low-income type programs, we may make an investment to make sure that home is ready for the full investment, program that we would actually enroll them in. But those are just some of the things that, we've attempted.
Also, too, if I can just jump into, since we're the ones putting the scope of work together often, for attic insulation, and Marshall probably is at the level he is, doesn't realize this, but part of attic insulation is attic air seal. So it's a 2-for-1. If we're recommending attic insulation, the air seal prep that goes into the attic to prep the attic is air seal. So you don't do one without the other. And in terms of air sealing in the home, we will do air sealing in the living space to a cost-effective degree. But sometimes it's better to DIY air sealing in the living space. It just depends. Sometimes it does cash flow out and we'll put it on a scope of work inside the home space. Sometimes it doesn't. But again, if attic insulation is being required, so is attic air seal.
Makes sense to do it while you're already in there.
Absolutely. And then duct sealing, when that's needed, is done. It's basically air seal, duct seal, attic insulation, and HVAC. That's essentially the upgrades. That's the tools we normally go to.
Very nice. Marshall, let me ask you, what your customers that go through this program, what do they say? Are they like overjoyed with it? Like what is their feedback?
It's interesting. We actually sample, we survey our member owners once a quarter. And it's generally a sample of about 250 of a random sample of our member owners, but we make sure that there's a certain number of that 250 who are folks who are participating in this program. And we will have a separate line of questions in addition to just overall satisfaction. But one thing we do identify that comes out of this is this sampling, and we've been doing it for well over a year now, shows to be more satisfied than the typical member owner in our system who's actually receiving service from us. So we were very intentional on that and wanted to at least get a feel or a sense, from the member owners without the verbatims. I mean, obviously, but by and large, the verbatims are good. I mean, we have had some folks, I mean, obviously, if you can't get their electric bill all the way down to zero, there still may be an issue there, but nevertheless, we've been able to hear, by and large, most of our member owners indicate that there are savings, that they're seeing the savings in the bill. So the perception of it is probably just as good or even better than the M&V. And so we're getting good, comments, but you're always going to have the outliers in anything. But nevertheless, we hear overall, very good comments. And the one measuring tool I will say that shows the impact is the survey work that we're doing. And each time we do them, this sample tends to show a higher level of satisfaction with this company than a person who did not participate.
Very nice, very nice. I've got another question here from Jason. Jason from Spencer Municipal Utilities. He asks, do you offer the program to homes who have gas as a heat source? Do they need to be all electric or be in line to electrify the home? This might be a Tammy question.
So, if there is such a thing as the ability in the state of Iowa to fuel switch, we can fuel switch as long as, you can fuel switch from gas to electric. Now, the one thing I would say about that is recall that we need to be able to put the participant in a cash flow positive situation. So the costs of gas, per BTU versus the cost of kWh is a factor there. What I can say is very simply is that where we've seen fuel switching never be a head scratcher is in propane. And Marshall kind of spoke to that. Propane is always, or has always, in our experience where we've worked anyway, been more expensive on a BTU than kWh has. And so switching from propane or switching from oil is a no-brainer. So to the other question, though, where I can say we do in Missouri right now, we are doing pays with every single investor-owned utility in the state. And all investor-owned utilities in the state are in very high dense population cities. And in those cities, we don't have propane, we have natural gas. And Spire is the natural gas provider in Missouri in all of the same cities where our investor-owned utilities on the electric side are operating. And Spire has linked arms with those electric utilities. And so together, Spire and the electric utilities, investor-owned utilities, we are co-operating pays for them. So how it carves out is the direct proportion of the upgrade that pertains to heat savings or gas savings if they're a gas customer, and then the carve out on the AC or the electric side. That's how they're splitting the investment. So it's in direct correlation with the anticipated savings. Now that's because we have a gas provider here that didn't want to be left out of the pays equation. But that said, I'll give you one more example. In Arkansas, where there is no fuel switching in Arkansas, but Ouachita Electric Cooperative in the Southern Arkansas Delta did not want to deny his electric co-op members who were heating with gas the opportunity to upgrade. So they said, we don't care, we'll upgrade with a furnace. It'll be a 95.5 AFUE furnace. We don't care. We'll do that because they got a gas provider that didn't want to play. So anyway, it's really up to you and the regulations in the state.
Very good. I think that answers it. Jason, if it doesn't, please ask again. But just my additional question to that one would be, if let's say we have a member who is an electric only member and their gas is provided by rural propane and they want to do attic and air sealing, would they be able to participate in pays if they're the electric utility and the heat source is propane and they want to keep it as propane?
Yeah, there's no rule that keeps that from, if the utility says we want to do this, then absolutely. They're still using electric year round. And I don't know what the, cooling degree days are in Iowa. They might have a bigger copay, because there's not as much savings there. And that's the end of the day, what would happen is the copay would go up. But there's nothing that prevents them from doing that.
Okay, yeah, I think most of our members are definitely summer peaking. That could be changing as heat pumps become more prevalent, but for now, I would say most of them are summer peakers. Great answers. I have another question here from Joel Zook and Ames. He asks, Marshall, are you looking at heat pump water heaters as a measure to encourage through pays?
We are, yeah, very similar to that whole storm windows piece. That was on that list as well. I failed to mention that earlier, but we are exploring adding heat pump water heaters as well.
Very nice. Yeah, when we were talking, I think we identified that as a possible good target project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I believe that's
Awesome.
coming in under the DOE programs now.
Yep. Let's see here. Do any other members have any questions before I keep asking mine? All right. Could you just say again how the ways in which pays beats the other financing programs you've tried in the past?
Right. So inclusive, that's the key word, inclusivity. It brings more equity. Everything we've done in the past, we've outsourced it to banks, financial institutions, community development, financial institutions. But what really sets this apart is the tariff. I must say, it's the tariff itself, because we're able to, recover, and we're recovering not from individuals, but from the house. So if that home can withstand a 10 to 12 year investment, that's the credit worthiness there, and it's all tied to that location. It's site specific. So that's what kind of sets it apart, if you ask me.
Gotcha.
And I do see that question. We're not there yet. We are looking at that. We haven't gone to that level yet of financing residential solar, but it's interesting. I'm sure you all as well. There are advocacy groups that will inquire on things like that, and that showed up on a scorecard for us just not too long ago. So it's something that is on our radar, but we've put a lot of focus in community solar right now, and we will help individuals who are, obviously serve as a resource and referral at this time, but we're not doing it here yet. But Ouachita is, to Tammy's point.
Yeah, they've only done a handful of projects thus far because they're in the kind of the beta stages of it.
Mhm.
They allow for a 20-year payback because obviously the investment's higher. And they are, the work is out on that, but they so far, thumbs up. But, that's very particular to the area, to costs, et cetera. So we can certainly look at it, and there's no reason why you can't do it on pays if it's something you want to do and it works out. Put it that way.
And Tammy, for our members who may want to focus more on community than solar on the other side of the meter, there isn't a requirement that you must allow solar to go through pays, is there?
Oh, no.
Okay.
The only real requirement is that when we're forecasting savings, we're forecasting energy savings. And that's important because we can't make pays about a certain fuel type or energy type. So when we are forecasting estimated savings, we have to be blind to if that customer is using electric, gas, propane, whatever they're using to energize their home has to be put into that calculation to figure out the cost effectiveness, or in other words, what is the copay going to be, if any? So that's it. And that's why I say, if somebody's, fuel switching, and they're going from natural gas probably to kWh, depending, of course, they could be going from a 70 AFUE, gas hog furnace to an 18 SEER, 9.0 HSPF, stage 2 heat pump. if they're doing that, then the savings is probably, we're probably not going to affect the copay that much, but there's still might be a little higher copay. It just depends. But we're going back using the last year of energy use costs, regardless of the source, as the baseline to factor in forward savings. And that is using that baseline is that's our work. That's our baby. That's what we do. And we'll sit back and put the most cost-effective offer together. And then whatever is left over after we satisfy the 80-20 rule is the copay. So again, you might just have somebody with a higher copay.
Thanks. When you guys are calculating savings, anticipated savings, are you using like state standard technical reference manuals, or is that kind of your own proprietary thing?
Well, it's not necessarily proprietary, but again, because deemed savings, when you're using TRM, we can report in deemed savings for utilities that are reporting in deemed savings. But for estimated savings, we have to use real meter data. We're not going to be able, you can't, make sure somebody's not upside down using deemed savings. You have to really make sure you're using meter data. So it's not necessarily proprietary to utility, but I will say that we've worked closely with Optimizer and we've developed the ability to confidently do this. And that's what we would propose you use, of course.
Gotcha. And then Marshall, how did you market or do outreach for this program once you adopted it?
What was interesting is we were on the heels of another program, and we had a list of 990 of our member owners who were kind of in the pipeline that we needed to serve. And we had a program, the program that preceded this one was one where we partnered with a credit union and couldn't really, make impact there. So that list and a lot of the calls that came in on high bill complaints made it pretty easy to have this as something in our toolkit. And then the other side to that is we did get very specific on some customer segmentation to look at homes and their profiles to determine if they would be a good fit, meaning they're the ones who could help us clip that peak. And so we've done some outreach in some situations. So that's, and then beyond that is just something that's general that we will send out, but we try to target those folks where we know it will be a good fit for us and respond accordingly. We're in the electric utility, so that's, you're going to get those calls. And so that's an easy response to have that in your toolkit.
Absolutely. I think I'm at the end of my list of questions. Does anyone else on the call have a question they would like to ask? Tammy or Jeff, any questions you'd like to ask or things you'd like to add?
I don't really have anything to add at this point, other than just to say and reiterate that I'm available. Marshall's available, Jeff's available. We're all here to help. You guys got to do due diligence. We recognize that. But that's what we're here for. So use us.
I would just reiterate the Iowa Economic Development Authority's interest in seeing a pay-as-you-save demonstration, one or more in Iowa. And we've identified a couple of programs that we have access to that we think could be really great opportunities to help offset startup costs to get a pay-as-you-save demonstration project going here in Iowa. So we definitely would entertain that and would really like to see a demonstration happen here. So if you have any more questions for me or want to follow up with me, that would be great as well.
Awesome. I've got one other question in the chat from Chris. How do we get a hold of either Jeff or Tammy? Chris, I'll send out the emails of Jeff, Tammy, and Marshall to everyone on this meeting today. And I'll just kind of leave it up to you to reach out to them. Hoping I see Jeff has left his email in the chat. Maybe that's a better way to do it. But for everyone on the YouTube channel who may be watching this later, if you email me at jgorrie@iamu.org, that's G as in golf, ORRIE @iamu.org, I will send you that contact information. Great. And if we have no other questions, I think it's time to wrap this up. Thank you so much, Marshall. Really appreciate you talking to our members today. Jeff and Tammy, appreciate all your efforts, and look forward to working with any of our members who may consider pays in the future.
Thanks for your interest, Jeff Gorrie, and to all your members, and it's a pleasure.
All right, take
Thank you,
care, everybody.
everybody. Thank you, Marshall.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Marshall.
Goodbye.